This video will show the steps for the assembly of the top. The video is not the only source you should refer to. You should also look at your lab manual and make sure you're not skipping anything from that. So refer to the lab manual, and then you're going to refer to this video on how to make your top assembly. First, I have my piece. My laser engraved part is off center. This is just a scrap piece, but I'm going to take my laser engraving, face it downward. I'm going to take my two apron pieces, and I'm going to inspect them for any defects. So the first thing you want to do is take a look at your part. When I look at this edge, everything is nice and clean and it all looks good. If you had a side with a large defect or a chip near one of the routers, where the router came out from blowout, you'd want to make sure that's on the inside, so you're concealing the defects. Same with the other side. I'm going to inspect the piece and make sure everything looks okay. With these two, this one I've rounded first, so you want to make sure that if you round it before you assemble it, that the round goes on the outside. The only issue with doing that first is that it has a tendency to fall over and it's a little bit of a nuisance. Otherwise, if you round it first, it's probably the better route. The other piece is still square on both sides, so I'll round this after the assembly. You have the option to do either. I'm going to take a piece of scrap wood and push it up against the bottom, and then pull all three parts against that piece of scrap wood. Now every person's assembly should have one perfect edge that's nice and flush and lined up. And then any error should occur on the opposite side. So both of these don't match up perfectly to the length of the top. If your top was cut oversized, it's very easy now to cut it to match these. If these are the correct size and this is oversized, you can just simply cut that down to match. If your top is the correct size and these are oversized, get with the instructor on the best way to reduce the length of this. You don't just want to cut it all off of one side at one time. So you're going to cut one side first and then the other, but get with the instructor before you do that. If these are undersized and this is the correct size, get with the instructor again. You probably don't want to cut the entire thing to the incorrect length, because the correct length is something we inspect for. So depending on the severity, we may end up replacing these, but the total length needs to be correct. That's an inspectable item. So now that I've got the back lined up and I've taken care of any errors on this end, I've inspected my part so I know where all the defects are. They're all facing on the inside. I'm ready for the actual glue up. Whenever you're clamping your parts for the glue up, it's a good idea to have some scrap wood on either side to protect your part from the feet of the clamps, because the clamps will damage and mar your part. So you always want to have a nice piece of scrap to protect your part from the clamps. So I've got everything laid out and ready to go. I've got 3 clamps with me. I'll go ahead and get them about to the size that I need. And if this is your first time doing this, it's definitely a good idea to step through all the motions before you actually go and assemble it, because once you're assembling it, you don't want to run into any small issues. So check everything first, have everything set up and ready for you. So I've got my clamps, I've got my glue, I've got my scrap pieces, I've inspected the length already, and I've inspected for defects, so I'm ready to go. Before I glue up, right before you start, it's a good idea to dampen a paper towel so you can clean the glue off your fingers. As we're working, we're going to have to wipe glue off of parts. You don't want the glue on your fingers to be on other parts. And you also want to avoid sliding and shifting your part around, because the table surface can scratch your part. So there are nail heads occasionally that can leave a big gouge in your part. And now whenever you're applying glue to a part, it's almost universally true that you apply the glue to the smaller item. So this item is 3/4 of an inch, and this one is much larger. If I try to put the glue on this part, I may put glue up on a part that shouldn't have glue on it. It's very difficult to remove the glue from the surface. So instead of trying to put the glue on this edge, I'm going to put the glue on the smaller edge. So I'm going to apply the glue on both sides of this, and then keeping in mind that it's upside down. So I don't want any glue squeeze out to occur on the top surface. So I'm going to put the glue slightly biased towards the inside of the stool, and I'm going to leave the glue a little bit short on both edges, and then I'll cut a little bit there with my finger when I spread the glue out. So about a 1/2 inch shy short of each edge, slightly biased towards the inside of the child stool. And again, everything is set up. So again, small gap on either side, biased towards the top, and I will take my finger and spread it evenly. And it's better to put less the first time and add a little extra than it is to put too much the first time. So that's one side down. I'm going to flip it over. Again, this is my inside edge. A half inch to a quarter inch away from the edge. And the glue's not coming out very heavy this time. So now I've got a nice, even, thin skin of glue on both sides. You need to work kind of quickly. If the glue starts to dry over, it won't hold the parts very well. So I've cleaned all the glue off of my fingers, wiped them off with water, and then kind of ran my hand across my palm to remove any glue. I'm going to keep my little alignment board on the bottom, bring the part up, and just bring it squarely over. You don't want to bring it and shift it up and down, or you'll squeeze glue out onto the front edges of the apron. So bringing it square in. Same on the other side, bring it cleanly over. Again, this side will fall over if I don't support it. They're all flush on one end perfectly, and then I will start clamping it. I'm going to use a bar clamp in this case. Able to rotate this, it gives me a lot of power. You're not going to be able to tighten it a whole bunch at first, which is fine. Just going to twist it with your fingers a little bit. Make sure nothing's shifted. We're good. One in the center, one towards either end. So again, this end is flush. Now as soon as you get it clamped, you want to lightly pick it up and make sure that the top surface is flush with either end of the apron. So I'm going to lightly move this, tighten down the clamps. So I've leaned it off the edge of the table so I can reach the clamp handle securely, and I'm going to lightly flip it over. Again, you don't want to move it too much. And then this side here isn't nice and flush. So this, if I run my fingernail across it, I can hear that I'm catching it. It's pretty small, so you might be able to sand this out, but you can try while the glue isn't set yet to loosen it and just try to line them up. So loosening the clamp, maybe try loosening another one. The glue sets kind of quickly, so once it starts to grab a hold, it's very difficult to adjust. So I was able to adjust it. I've got some minor glue squeeze out, very little. You can read the lab manual on the best two ways to handle this. So I'm going to leave this little bit for now. There should never be large gaps. So the clamps are much stronger than the wood, and they will bend slightly bowed wood back into place. So if your wood has a little bow to it, the clamps will correct it. The only reason they wouldn't is if you put too much glue on and you let it skin over, and it's preventing the wood from actually closing inward. So if you clamp it quick enough, you will be able to close any gaps, and it will hold a bowed piece of wood nice and tight together. So you're going to want to let this sit for at least 15 minutes before you remove the clamps. If you can go a little longer, that will be okay. Again, you should have one side that's perfectly lined up. If possible, you would correct any errors beforehand, but the piece needs to be the correct length within tolerance. If you're able to cut pieces to match and make them the same exact length, that is ideal as long as it's within tolerance. And then again, all of the defects would be pushed in towards the inside. In this case, the one defect would be hidden in between the glue alignment, and then any other defects that I would have on here are on the inside of the part and wouldn't be visible on the outside of the part.